Hello, welcome to part 2 and 3 of Unit 7's module, Differentiating Instruction in Art and Music Education. I'm just going to jump right in and kind of get us started. The objective of this lecture is to explore differentiation strategies relevant to music and art classroom settings. So we have two readings, and then there's a resource here that I'll add in our Padlet. The first article is, let's see, differentiation in the music classroom. I think this one is pretty interesting. Both of them kind of cover things that we've already discussed, except the art one, you'll see my highlights, how to differentiate an art and design lesson. I think the things that were mentioned here are relevant to any art class, so that's why I selected this article. And then also I think that they can be applied to obviously all of our classroom settings, specifically art and music. So this is pretty cool. And then I love the choice board here, which is pretty awesome. Anywho, so those are our two readings, and you'll also need to make sure you do a thorough reading for the task for this week, because the discussion board does ask that you select quotes, and you'll see that you can't read until you post. So just FYI. Anywho, so how to differentiate an art and art and design lesson. They start talking about differentiation overall, which I think is critical for people to really understand what differentiation is and how it should be applied. And then they go into the specifics of the actual art class. So taking these ideas into consideration, that every student has specific needs and interests and learning styles. It says that content can be delivered differently to suit your very different learners. Is a differentiation what art is about. And I thought that was a pretty, that's actually my quote for the week, because I never really considered that art should be about varied expressions and us allowing, students to express who they are in different ways. But I think sometimes we get caught up in the have-tos instead of the inspirational things that we need to incorporate, or the art of teaching that we need to incorporate in our daily practices. So how do you do this? I chose a couple of things that they mentioned. I didn't focus on all of it, so obviously the reading is on you. But the first thing is, they said, remember, art is about expression. You would love for all students to paint, draw, or make a masterpiece. Some of our students were born with paintbrushes for hands, where others can't quite get what they see in their heads on paper. So everyone's not going to create a Picasso, in other words. Provide multiple entry points for art projects. So I had an interesting experience when I was in high school actually. I could not draw, still can't. And my teacher allowed me to create a clay piece. So this clay piece was probably about this tall. So I'm from my desk, and it was a clay fish, and the fish had a mouth open in this way. And I worked on the project the entire year. And the cool part about it was she found a way to get it, put it in the crematory thing, whatever that is, so that it would form, so the clay will harden and be I don't know the correct terminology, but that it could be baked in the oven. And then she made sure that I had the opportunity to get a grade based on that ability, because I could form clay, but I could not draw. So that was my exit from the art class. And I bring that up to say that, be open, be flexible to the ideas of the assignments that you have within an art setting. Or even a music setting, because not every student will maybe produce the exact same thing that you want. But with multiple entry points for the art projects or multiple pathways, they can produce something that could be magical. I had that huge fish with me for years, and I used it as a change thing for sometimes. It was just an awesome creation. I let it go eventually because the thing was hideous, but it was very interesting to have had the opportunity to create that. They say also make connections between art and real life, which should be done within any content area, but I think it matters even more with art. It says, for instance, when you ask your pupils to tell you what their favorite hobbies and activities are, then challenge them to find connections to art in each of them. So, art is in everything that we do. Our creative brain is necessary for us to access the true potential of our intellectual brain. So it is there. I try to incorporate artistic things within every aspect of my lessons so that students are using multiple parts of their brain. Differentiation in the music classroom. The music classroom pretty much reiterated the article about music differentiation, in music classrooms. Pretty much reiterated the same things that the art class did, so I only focus in on 1 or 2 points. They say here that differentiating music instruction requires teachers to know their students well, which I think is key in all areas, but specifically here it says in order to determine students' readiness levels, learning profiles, or interests, music teachers need to conduct pre-assessments to identify meaningful characteristics for flexible student groupings. So I think within music, the pre-assessments are actually really important because how else will you know where students are beginning? Setting the lesson at the same level could actually make a student not want to do the work because they feel already defeated. So I would say the pre-assessment, in addition to the other suggestions that the art classroom article on differentiation suggested, would maybe help, especially if you're having a hard time with students who are not exactly at the level you want them to be. Maybe having the pre-assessment prior to would enable you to find a different way to engage them. So here it says, and it is imperative that any differentiated lesson or assignment be based on the applicable characteristics of a particular group of students with regards to their readiness levels, interests, or learning profiles. In other words, if the students can't grasp it, it's kind of like you're not wasting your time, but you're fighting a battle that may not be won this year. So it's best that you design things that fit who they are. So it says what works with one fifth grade class may not work for every fifth grade class. So I'm challenged with some differentiation this week as well, because for me, I'd like to go over my classroom expectations and procedures as far as academically with a very set structure, so it's not as explorative but very defined so that there's no guessing. But I had a class that was after the blackout. They were really exhausted, and they're like, I just did a general survey. How many people are bored out of their mind? More than a third of the class rose their hands. So I know that regardless of the type of content I need to make sure they all get, I need to find a very fancy way to deliver it. So this weekend I'll be, after I have my library session, because I'm still in dissertation mode, I will be creating some interestingly different ways of delivering the same content for the fifth period, because it's right before lunch and they were kind of exhausted. So I like the mottos and the examples that were presented in both of these, and I'm going to try to adopt some of them. Especially I like the picture choice board. So I'm in the middle of making some of mine this weekend because our course expectations are due. Open house is next week. So yeah, we are quite busy. High school is like a fast pace. So anyway, I thought those were super useful. Hopefully you can find the same value in them as I did. Next are the models. So I had a hard time finding some models of differentiated instruction, but this one is differentiated music curriculum. And she goes into some specifics about how she differentiates music curriculum overall, and this is a high school setting. And then this one is an example of differentiated instruction in a specific art teacher's classroom. So take what you can from them. There was not a lot out there, but I think it is difficult to... I think people just don't realize they're differentiating in these subject areas. So they're not trying to capture it as something that's useful and kind of like a guide for other people. So there's not a lot out there. But if you have some videos that you think would be useful, add them to the blog, or not to the blog, but to your post, to your thread this week, as I'm sure if you do teach music or art, you'll find it to be a useful resource. That concludes the lecture, or mini lecture. Hope you have a fantastic weekend and that you rest up and get ready for the long haul of the year.